Thank you. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Human Plus Tech Talk series discussion for today. I'm Blonid Clark. I'm the McCann Fitzgerald Chair of Corporate Law in the law school here in Trinity College, Dublin. And I'm involved in this programme, have been for the last year, and absolutely enjoying it thoroughly. And we're hoping to share some of the discussions and convey some of the excitement about the research that we're doing here in TCD. So Human Plus, you may be aware of it. It's a commission funded research programme. We're bringing together computer science experts from arts and humanities, and bringing them together with experts from enterprise. It's this which really stands out for me as making this a really unique programme. We're examining human-centered technology research. And you might say, well, what is that? You know, that's a very big title, and how do you unpack it? And so this is how we've been using the Tech Talk series just to explain some of the issues we've been looking at. So far, we have heard from colleagues working on AI and ethics. We've heard from colleagues working on avatars and identity, and also the future of robots for everyday lives. Today, we're focusing on embedding human values and ethical standards into AI. And I think this is just such an important topic and so timely. So in the paper today, I'm reading that this week marks the first human clinical trials of a drug which is being produced to cure a very serious neurological illness, where the entire data has been identified using AI. So it gives us a really good insight into the positives. But also we have concerns on the global front. So this week again marks the acquisition of Twitter. So these are all issues that I think we can agree need a holistic response. So without any more ado, I'm going to introduce our speakers for today. So firstly, we'll hear from the Human Plus Fellow, Nicola Palladino, and I'm particularly pleased to be introducing Nicola, as Dave and I co-supervise Nicola's research. He's working on corporate governance for trustworthy and human-centric AI from principles to practice. We'll be joined afterwards by Professor Dave Lewis from ADAPT, who is the lead and the expert in computer science on all things AI related. Then we're delighted to be joined by Dr. Ken McKenzie, who's the research portfolio lead in the Human Science Studio in Accenture. And he's also an enterprise mentor with us on this program. And as I say, this is what makes this sort of research absolutely key and valuable. And then last but not least, we're joined by Dr. David Philip, who's the chair of the National Mirror for AI. So just a word or two in terms of format. Each of the speakers will present for about 8 to 10 minutes, and then we will throw the floor open for questions. So if you have any questions in advance, please add them into the chat function, and we'll do our best to get through as many as possible. We have a hard deadline to complete by 5 to the hour, so we will try and fit in as much as we can. So Nicola, without more ado, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, thank you so much. Sorry for this incident. I will provide just a brief overview about the concept of trustworthy AI. And trustworthy AI in the last few years have become a very popular word, we could say a buzzword in this field. And the reason is easy to understand. Is also, the first reason is because trust is a key factor for adoption of new technologies. And we are living in time where there is a great crisis of trust in technology. And all the talk about trustworthy AI reflect the concern by the governments, the industry, and the technical community that some wave of mistrust can hinder the development and the spread of artificial intelligence technologies, undermining the exploitation of all the benefit that this kind of technology can bring us. But another kind of explanation can be also be seen in the fact that adopting a trustworthy AI approach is also the best way to moving forward with a human-centric AI. Well, and this could be appear more evident if we look at some definition of trust and trusted technology and trustworthiness. By and large, trust could be defined as the willingness to depend on another party because of the characteristics of the party. And this is what is important to understand in this kind of definition, that describe a relationship where we decide to rely to someone else, to another agent, to complete our course of action without having the full control of the situation. But this confidence is not based on blind trust, on an act of faith. It's based on the characteristic that we see in the agent. It gives us some guarantee that in the end we can complete our task, or the end that we proposed at the beginning. And it's important to underline this point because very often the notion of trustworthy AI has been criticized for that, because it could give the idea that we have to rely on new technology without a full knowledge, without understanding what it's doing. But it's not so, because as we are going to see, there are to sustain this relation of trust is needed some characteristic and some requirement unsatisfied. And so we can define trust in technology as the belief that technology has the attributes necessary to perform as expected in a situation. And then I want to draw your attention also on the definition of trustworthiness that have been developed in the International Standard Organization, that is considered as the ability to meet stakeholder expectation in a verifiable way. And here is was nothing that trustworthiness does not describe anymore a relationship, but a property of the system that we're going to create. And well, what are these attributes that can create the trust in technologies? Well, there are some basic attributes that we can apply to every technology, from the toaster in your kitchen to an airplane. And first attribute is the ability of functionality. This is the capability to complete the expected task. Basically, I want that my toaster actually toasts my bread for breakfast. Not too much, not too little. And another characteristic is continuity or robustness, that is the ability to maintain its level of performance under any circumstance. And that means that I prefer if my toaster will not broke one day after I bought from the shopping center. No? And another characteristic is safety. This is the expectation that a system does not endanger human life, health, property, or the environment. And hopefully that our toaster will not produce a fire in our apartment, probably. And this is apply to the toaster, to the plane, of course, also for artificial intelligence. We expect that artificial intelligence do what they are being created for, and exactly the kind of task with some quality standard requirement also. We want that an artificial intelligence system is able to give the same level of performance, even if there is some perturbation, even if, for example, there could be some problem with the hardware that sustain the artificial intelligence system, or also if we put the system in another environment and then with a different data. And of course, we want that artificial intelligence system don't endanger the autonomy and integrity of people and environment. But there are some further requirements that have been described in the software engineering. As we can see, there are some of the requirements recur, but there are also new requirements, say availability, security, and But when we talk about artificial intelligence, the things are more, even more complex, because artificial intelligence can challenge trustworthiness. For a serious characteristic, most of them are related to the inherent socio-technical nature of artificial intelligence system. Well, such an artificial intelligence system are the product of a very long and complex pipeline where we have a different kind of actor and stakeholder that interact with the software and the hardware. And this poses one question. What is the object of our trust? We rely on the product, we rely on the producer, we rely on the development process or in some component of the artificial intelligence system. And another aspect that need to be considered is that most of the time artificial intelligence systems are used to make prediction, recommendation, or decision. But when we have human decision maker, we are in front of a more agent, and we can trust on their decision because of their autonomy, their competence, or their objectivity, or because they are legitimated to take this kind of decision. And the use of artificial intelligence technology problematizes all this situation. And we have to ask to ourselves, what are the kind of decisions that we can rely completely, we can trust completely to an artificial intelligence system, and what are the oversight mechanisms that we need to put to place in order to control if the decision is correct, and also how can we find some equivalent of competencies, objectivity, and legitimacy for artificial intelligence system. And another question arises by the unpredictability of artificial intelligence system. That it means that especially when we are talking about of neural network, deep learning technology, very often we don't know very much what the machine is doing. We cannot know perfectly what is the process that transformed one input in an output. And sorry, this is the opaqueness of artificial intelligence system. And an artificial intelligence system could be explainable, but also opaque because we have not enough information about the decision-making process that will be done in the organization, about all the decision on the technical specification of the system. And then artificial intelligence system pose also some question about validation verification because they are not a deterministic system. Well, in 2099, the European Commission, the expert group on artificial intelligence established by the European Commission, released the ethics guideline for trustworthy AI that has set a group of 7 general principle or requirements that need to be satisfied to realize trustworthy artificial intelligence. And we can see there is a human agency oversight, technical robustness and safety, privacy and data governance, transparency, diversity, accountability, and social and environmental well-being. Practitioners are still struggling to implement this kind of principle, and there are many obstacles, but there are also a lot of initiatives that have been done to try to start this process of implementation and translation. We have several legislative initiatives, but we have also different standardization initiatives that have started. And in the last few years, we also witnessed to a flourishing of AI-ethic tools that have been created to implement artificial intelligence principle for trustworthy AI. Well, the last thing that when I say that we are moving forward to an hybrid governance environment for trustworthy AI, where we are trying to combine general principle, what could be organizational procedures, and also more technical solution. And the general frame is that, for example, the frame that is started with the Artificial Intelligence Act, having a public regulator that set some requirement for artificial intelligence system, and then we can have a standard set organization that creates some kind of procedures and methods to verify that these characteristics have been realized. And then at team level, we can have a team that uses more practical instrument to verify the property of the system. Well, I think that I took enough, and now I will leave the floor to the other guests they will explain to us in how this kind of process are taking place. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think you can see there just the complexity of the issues that Nicola is grappling with, but also how intriguing they are and how important and relevant they are, and certainly looking at this in a time of a crisis of trust. So I'm going to turn over to my co-supervisor Dave for a response and some comments.
Thanks. We're just queuing up the slides there. So, while we do that, I just want to celebrate. I come at this from the point of view of my core interest in computer science is knowledge engineering. So that's about how do we represent knowledge in organizations, communicate it clearly within organizations, communicate it clearly externally to organizations in a way that works both for humans and for, it can be machine readable as well. Okay. And, one place where, I'm interested in clarity of communications, there's very little machine readability is in the standards area. So David will talk a bit more about that. But one of the things, what's interesting to observe in that area is they're really, we're struggling to find, if you like, the canonical home. I think, what Nicola's research has really showed us, that there's a huge amount of people who are pulling together all of these different, different guidance and standards, in this area. I can drive that, Nicola. I can drive the keyboard if you just pass it over.
Okay.
Yeah. And just to flag here, we mentioned the EU AI Act, the stuff going on in the US from a legislative point of view, and these are important because they take sort of trustworthiness from just being a good idea to being the law. So that obviously accelerates our interest in it. With the emerging standards that we talk about, so we'll probably hear a bit more about SC42 under ISO IEC. There's a European version of that called JDC 21, so you have to get to grips with this spaghetti soup of alphabet soup of letters. There's the IEEE. There's also national bodies, Germany, UK, I think are very interesting at the moment because they're trying to sort of be compatible with other people's standards, but also make themselves a bit more of a destination to undertake some of this certification. So from public bodies, the EU themselves, OECD, UNESCO, probably the most recent sort of actor now working in there, as well as, a huge plethora of stuff from different organizations. And I think when you look at all of these together, Nicola's done a really nice sort of analysis of, all the different terms that are in there. You can sort of see some systemic concerns that you also see emerging in the literature itself, being critical about other guidelines that are out there. So there's a plethora. How many of these are actually workable? There's a lot of papers out there talking about, how do we go from principles to practice, and where we're in that shift at the moment. As the regulatory landscape becomes a bit clearer, we start worrying about the regulatory load versus the benefit. So, we have to weigh that up, and legislators have to weigh that up. There's a lot of complexities actually specific to AI to do with the value chain. It's a data-driven technology, so we have to understand the sort of the data value chain. And that involves issues around liability that can't come into play. So we have to understand those as well. We have to understand who's actually going to provide oversight. So to date, we've been relying on organisations doing this themselves and, asking us to trust them in doing that. Probably not, I would say, with, great practice in terms of real drill down transparency in terms of the oversight processes. And also, I think, as you were pointing out, Nicola, we have to really think carefully about the stakeholders who are involved. Trustworthiness is about, satisfying stakeholders. We have to understand who that is and who they are. And this is all being done with, accusations flying around about ethics washing or, the usefulness or otherwise of a lot of these, if you like, sort of voluntary standards. So, we're interested in how will the legislation help meld these together? Will the international standards help meld these together? But we also have to be aware that there's divergent pressures there as well. So, from an academic point of view, you still see, so it's a highly interdisciplinary topic. There's a lot of, really interesting, valuable insight from different disciplines, from computer science all the way through to many different sort of humanities, philosophy, etc. But I still don't see a lot of melding, a lot of those. People are sort of arguing from their point of views. There's a few nice little bits of proper multidisciplinary work, but you still see, there's a schism between, the traditional academic sort of cultures, if you like, the people who are pointing out the problems and the people saying, but we've got a solution. And I'm not quite sure how many of those are meeting together. And there are also other emerging sort of divergent pressures. I think they're sectorial ones. So, some sectors say, well, actually, we want to move ahead and, in automotive or whatever it might be, say, well, we're going to come up with our own way of doing this. There's technological pressures. So, at the moment, there's a discussion about whether sort of perhaps some of the more general purpose AI should be treated differently to other forms of AI. And of course, there's going to be a jurisdictional set of pressures. So, if we go back and say, well, how can we actually break this down and analyze, this very, very, very complicated and pressurized situation? And I think one of the things, as I say, I'm interested in is this sort of flow of information, clarity of information, consistency of information. So, the first thing, usually when we work in standards, we're interested in how do organizations in the value chain communicate with each other. That's really important. And, we have various models out there. This is sort of a typical one based on OECD. So you've got people who provide data, people who actually develop AI models, machine learning models, people who put those in applications, and the people who use those applications. But, to really understand trustworthiness, we have to understand the social context we're working in. And then within that, we have to understand, well, okay, who are the actors who are involved in oversight? So there are people who are doing stuff, building things, trying to produce value, and people who provide oversight. So that's oversight both within organizations, ethics committees, managers, quality specialists, risk specialists, compliance specialists, and then external oversight, which isn't quite there yet, but is emerging with the regulation, which we already see in data protection, but we would see, in future going forward with the, for example, the AI Act in Europe. And this is the typical model of co-regulation that we use whenever we're, introducing a technology that society wants to regulate. And then we also have to understand who are the affected stakeholders. So some of them are in this, they're workers, users, the data subjects are involved in this value chain, but also we can impact on people who are outside of the value chain, who are not using any of these products, but perhaps their credit rating is affected or whatever that might be. And what we're, in my research, at least what we're interested in is what is the communication that goes on between the oversight authorities and the affected stakeholders. For sure, people in the value chain need to be involved, but there needs to be, trust ultimately is between the people who are enforcing the rules and the people who are hoping the rules are being enforced in their benefit. So we're interested in, well, what signals do the oversight mechanisms send that help build trust, from the people who are affected? And perhaps going beyond that, what affordances does oversight involve? Is there mechanisms for complaint or redress, or even just contributing to the appreciation of what the risks are when we're talking about, a wide range of sort of fundamental rights? So this is a big spaghetti diagram, again, to sort of more convey the complexity than to sort of provide useful information. This is transposing a little bit what's in the AI Act. The big sort of octagon in the middle is, that's an AI provider of the future that will have to conform to the AI Act. And to do that, it will need a quality management system. Okay, quality management system will be typically something that comes from one of the ISO standards. There's a template for management systems that are standardized in many areas: security, general sort of software quality, and we're working on one for AI management systems. And the important thing to know here is essentially it's something we're very familiar from organizational governance. It's a learning loop. Okay, so you're doing all the things you'd expect to do, sort of risk management, putting in resources, doing the thing you're doing, building AI, whatever it might be, but then also auditing it and monitoring incident reports. And the idea is you're doing risk assessment, but you understand that your risk assessment is probably going to be incomplete and you're going to have to learn as you go along. There'll be things that you miss. And the regulatory environment that especially the Use AI Act is built around that sort of model. So it's a risk management model. And in that, you've got people who, well, the idea is that you do your risk assessment according to your quality management system. And if it's sufficiently low risk, you get a CE mark. You could give that to yourself, or you could go to a conformance assessment body who will do that for you. And then you've got market surveillance authorities who can fine you or take your products off the market. Two sort of classes of oversight. And actually in the AI Act, apart from seeing these CE marks and perhaps seeing a particular application is on a high-risk database or perhaps is removed from the market or fined, there's not a lot of signals out there. And there's actually very little in the way of, if you like, affected stakeholders engaging in that regulatory process because it's typically been based around sort of health and safety. And to give a bit of an idea, there's a number of application areas where there's already conformity assessments who are now also going to have to look at AI, and not just looking at AI for health and safety, but also for your fundamental rights, your 54 EU fundamental rights on market surveillance. Again, you need to understand all of that. You have to do that in each of the 27 member states, and you have to do it for all these new areas of high risk as well. So there's a very complicated space. And so just to sort of wrap up, I want to say, well, it's great that this, we're using this sort of learning loop, this learning management system within the organizations, but we need to think about where else do we need that? So certainly the regulators need to be learning, and there's some mechanisms in the AI Act for how they should all communicate to each other, and hopefully, a bit like we see with GDPR, they'll learn over time and improve guidance. But we also need to think about, well, where are these signals being transmitted from oversight? So should we be expecting more transparency? And there's mechanisms such as regulatory sandboxes in the AI Act that allow us to experiment with these to actually, better understand and communicate with society in general, affected stakeholders about the nuts and bolts of risk assessments. Are we really catching things? And also on the incident reporting side, again, is this something that's going to be completely an internal technocratic mechanism, or will we put some of these incident reports in the public domain in a way that, there can be some societal debate about it? So there are some sort of things I think missing from the AI Act and, don't naturally fall out of the standardization either, but they probably do need a little bit of attention. Can we use some of the existing mechanisms that are being developed, but just strive to make them a little bit more open, perhaps not completely open, but perhaps within regulatory sandboxes, so people who are going to benefit by talking to each other, affected stakeholders, the vendors, their suppliers, their users, and the regulators can experiment and learn a bit, because I think certainly we don't know all the answers right now, and we need to think about a safe way of learning what the answers will be.
Thank you.
So I'll leave it there.
Thank you. I think that was just excellent, just to do that sort of deep dive. I think it gives us all an idea of just the scope of this research and the ambitious, nature of it, and also, key issues coming up again and again in terms of verification and measurement and transparency, but also this multidisciplinary nature of this work. And one thing, for example, that Nicola and Dave and I have found in sitting down is that we are all speaking a slightly different language because we come from different backgrounds. And again, it's really important to understand that and to form a sort of a common level that, as Dave said, we can explain to others in terms of the regulation. One of the issues as well is making sure that what we have is workable in terms of the principles to practice. And this is where our industry partner is so essential. This is, the value that Accenture and Ken bring to our work is just impossible to underestimate. So Ken, I'm going to turn over to you perhaps for some comments on this.
Sure. Okay. So I'm not going to do any slides, which probably goes against all known rules of management consulting. But I'm here to talk about this idea of, it's actually set up in the introduction, this idea of how do we get, I would say, a human understanding into what can be done with AI and understanding maybe some limits around AI. I'm going to begin with the idea that humans need guidance. Experts might prefer guidance or proffer guidance, but humans need guidance. So I'm talking about citizens. I mean, people who don't have postgraduate qualifications for the most part. Citizens need guidance around this new thing that we're being told is going to get ever more powerful. I'm going to begin with saying, I think sometimes what we describe as AI isn't AI. And I'm not an AI developer and have no computer science background. But as a citizen, I've read maybe 3 major cases where we are told AI has gone wrong. And it's how it's reported in good quality journalism, I would say. One is the use of fraud detection software by Royal Mail with postmasters and postmistresses in the UK. The second is ProPublica's account of using predictive policing analytics in the US that showed up an ethnic disparity in rating of likelihood of reoffending. And then I would say the other one is possibly or probably the Netherlands government case of detecting social welfare fraud among claimants. I'm not really sure that any 3 of those are AI. They may just be large end data sets with some statistics on them. Did the system learn from those things and go on and make more kind of HAL 2000 errors? Or was it simply a large end data set with some insertions on it? I'm not really sure. And I think sometimes, I'm not saying academics do this because I don't think that's happening, but I do think that industry and some oversell things being AI when they may not be AI, and actually ask a professional statistician for the kind of dinner party jokes they have around people getting mistakes around AI. It's like, we have had credit scores long before we've had AI. How are those credit scores arrived at? We've had insurance weightings long before AI. How are those insurance weightings arrived at? Large end data sets with some inferential statistics. So that's the first thing. Humans tend to get genuinely scared by the new, but I would just say there's an element of old wine and new bottles with AI. I'm not saying that's completely the case, but when you take the large end data set idea with statistics added onto it, how it affects people's lives, that continuity remains. My second idea is that in order for humans to really understand AI, and I include like senior decision makers in government and senior business leaders, they probably need signals. They need cognitive anchors that they can genuinely understand. And I actually think, going back to what Dave Lewis just demonstrated there, you get this clash of systems and sets of initials and codes, and none of them are in any way wrong-headed or deviant, but it's quite headache-inducing to think what will take precedence and where will we get clarity. I think that in order for humans to gain clarity, they need to rely on very old institutions to filter the world of AI for them. A really old institution they will need is the court system. We probably still do not have that single court case that says AI was used here were its assumptions. Those assumptions are flawed. Here were the consequences in these people's lives that would not have arisen if that AI system hadn't been in place. And therefore we need to think of this, this, and this. I think that would serve as a magnet on iron filings to focus developers, and I mean that in the larger sense, developers' attention on what they should actually do when they're building and testing their models. We probably need a court opinion. I'm not saying tax law works, but we know when we're breaking tax law. I'm not saying AI law will work, but we will know when we are breaking it in certain jurisdictions. And we need, I think, these, I don't know, Blarney probably, I'm sure is about 10 now. We need this critical juncture decision where we can say, oh, because of that statement, we now know this to be true for the US or for the EU or for Ireland, whatever. I think the second ancient institution humans need to give them a cognitive anchor is democracy. Just because it's hard to understand doesn't mean we don't need human input on it. Now, I think what's unfortunate is that the world of expertise can be ambivalent about bringing in human input. In some cases, if you bring in humans that think stuff that does not make sense, I'm using that in a very guided way, but around things like, for example, the development of vaccines, you've got to be incredibly careful about how you use human input. Yes, you can consult, but to what extent does ordinary citizen input become veto power? I think we have to be incredibly careful about that. How can humans input on, statistical models, I'm just going to use that term, and that, to be honest, probably most people will simply not understand. We know from work by people like Gerd Gigerenzer that people find even compound interest calculations incredibly hard. What are they going to do with statistical models on this scale? But I still think we need to explain things to people. We probably need citizen jury type exercises. I know Essex County Council in the UK, Essex Council is working with the police force and Essex University on explaining how they're using data as they go around building new models. We probably need citizens juries, and we need senior legislators in them as well, to understand the difference of normative and descriptive AI. So if there are imbalances in society, AI cannot undo those imbalances. Some people say it can. It can reflect them or exacerbate them. I don't think it can undo them. That's my view, and others will disagree. I don't think it can make things better unless you choose to make them better, which you don't need AI for. You can just legislate. You don't need AI to make things better. Just make them better. So I think we need democracy, and we don't need democracy in going back to the legal sense to set the legislation. We need democracy to kick the ideas around the room. What is possible with AI? What's implausible with AI? What's good and what's bad about it? I think the third thing we need to consider then is another ancient institution, which is where can universities help? I remember years ago hearing the first time of where they introduced problem-based learning was it being introduced into Trinity College. So gross simplification, instead of just studying the basic sciences and then getting the pathology, you look at the pathology and use your basic sciences to get into the problem as well. Now that is a gross simplification, but let's run with it. But I don't hear enough clear descriptions of what are the problems with AI we're trying to solve. And are some of those problems solvable? Or are they just the nature of the beast? For example, large statistics will show social class disparities, irrespective of whether you use AI on them or not. I think we need problem-based learning. We need to get people together. For example, will doctors be sued in 10 years' time for uncritically accepting an AI-recommended therapy because they don't understand the calculus behind which was made to make that happen? Is that going to be a new version of Boehm's law? Are we expecting doctors to become machine interpreters or not? I think we need to go right back to the university system and look at how we train computer scientists, how we train sociologists, and they're going to have to talk to each other and others as well. And I don't actually know if the university timetable lends itself to this. Hackathon, which is its own loaded term, is probably the closest we get to it. I'm not sure you can train people in the ways required to genuinely get the distinction of here's what's possible with AI, here's where can it go wrong, and here's where it can't undo existing societal problems. I think that normative descriptive tension and the techniques used to understand those and the maths used to build them, I'm genuinely not sure we can get a perfect dialogue around those. But we need to work harder. We need probably 4-hour classes and lecture theatres and 6-hour labs rather than 50 minutes of double sessions. I know that's a very granular suggestion, but I think we need to see those things. So in short, I don't think we're going to make much progress here unless we use ancient institutions to help humans understand very complicated things. Very clever humans did not understand the maths models behind the financial crash. Very clever humans did not understand the airborne spread versus the other ways of explaining COVID. We don't really understand those things plainly. We're going to have to rely on the court system, citizens coming together, and the universities to help shine light on what can be done.
Thank you. That's fantastic. I think you've given us so much to think of, both in terms of our research project, but also in terms of universities and what we are really here to do, but also identified some of the issues. For the students listening, you're probably still reeling at the idea of 4-hour lectures. There's a benefit to be had. So I do have a couple of queries on that, but let me pick them up afterwards, particularly on the courts. I just can't let that one go, as you expected. So may I turn to our final speaker, David, to discuss some of his research and his work in terms of standardization in AI.
So I will do a slide share, but I realize I will not use much of this actually in the end, because I will try rather to react on what the other speakers said. I totally agree with what Ken said here. You know, like a lot of things are blamed on AI, you know, like bias, etc. But that's not AI. This is systemic issues that were created in decades, hundreds of years, and you can't just automatically resolve things. Yeah, oh, forbid bias, it will be automatically fixed. That just doesn't make sense. You know, that's not the thing. And I totally agree that the courts will play a very important role, because there's this new thing that Dave mentioned. Regulation so far was very simplistic. It was one-dimensional. You know, how many people does it kill? We will not let it do, you know, if it kills more than X. And that's one-dimensional. That's so easy. But now there are 49 fundamental rights. But the fundamental rights are a system. They are in inverse relationships to each other. You know, like you cannot maximize one over the other. You cannot maximize protection of life against protection of free speech or privacy or democracy or, you know, manipulating elections, things like that. So, you know, when the European legislator comes to my technical committee and says, and by the way, AI must not violate human rights, that's total nonsense. That's no task, you know. That's not solvable. They are throwing the problem over the wall, you know. But we are not stupid enough to accept it, you know, because we know technical committees are not supposed to make political decisions. You know, the fact that the politician or bureaucrat asks the committee to solve the business or political issue, that shows how little they know about it, but it doesn't make it a valid task for a technical committee. You know? So sorry for kind of bashing the task giver, but this is unfortunately the fact. You know, the AI Act is very much immature. We are doing our best in technical committees to answer, to respond, to provide support for the upcoming regulation. But there needs to be dialogue. There needs to be understanding. You know, there needs to be understanding that there are relationship between concepts that are to be standardized. Just a few anecdotal examples. Like, for instance, the AI Act requests that human oversight is standardized. That's another, well, that task is not impossible, but the problem is the current state of the art in the international standardization or even academia doesn't agree what does it mean, human oversight, right? Because, you know, the reason why we are employing these technologies, call them AI or something else, is because they have superhuman capability. And that means human usually isn't able to control them in real time. So I am chairing a group, international group. They've mentioned some of the alphabet soup here. JTC1 SC42, Working Group 3, Trustworthiness. That's my group, you know, I chair it, 15 projects on trustworthiness. One of them is controllability. And this is how you put a human understandable interface on a superhuman system to make sure that the human can well, that there can be accountability, that humans can exert efficient control over the system, even though the system is superhuman. And this is the reason why we do employ the system, because if it wasn't superhuman, why we would be using it, right? So another anecdotal thing, AI draft regulation requires AI systems to have emergency stop button. And now that, even just with what I just said, it doesn't make sense, right? Because the reaction of the health device people, this is absolutely stupid. If you put emergency stop button on a laser surgery device, the human can only do harm. The human cannot interrupt the procedure in a way that could be anyway beneficial. So oversight, we have another preliminary project that is called oversight, but this oversight project waits basically for the controllability project to become stable, technically stable. And it is looking at those things, like the question was, what do we actually trust? Do we trust this box? But it's not about the box, it's not about what the box does in real time, because I am not even able to observe the state of the box in real time. The oversight needs to spread over the life cycle, and the life cycle in the broadest sense, inception, retirement, when it gets dangerous, it has to be retired. So the oversight, it's very simplistic, naive, and impossible to assume that the oversight can happen in real time. So I have a huge slide deck. I'm not going to use it because I'm just reacting, But the slide deck can be made available for the people, why international standards. International standards are, consensus achieved by international organizations on the global level. The benefit is that it's unique consensus. You can be sure that there is no other authoritative opinion on that worldwide. So that's why you do worldwide standards. They are created according to World Trade Organization principles. The big three organizations are ISO, IEC, and ITU. ISO and IEC together, they have JTC1. This is the only joint committee between ISO and IEC, and this is where you standardize horizontal technology. AI is such a horizontal technology. So this is the European setup. The European agencies, Sensenelec and ETSI, they are mirroring the big three worldwide organizations. So I think that's enough. Yeah. I work in standardization. I am trying to, respond. But it wouldn't make sense to go any deeper. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I think you have given us huge food for thought there. So just excellent presentations. I'm going to check the chat function, but just as I do, could I just abuse my privilege and just ask one question? Since the last two speakers mentioned the importance of the courts in this respect, and the ability to take assumptions and look at the consequences. And I wondered what impediments you see to that, because when I look at that, I can see lots. So you mentioned one of those, David, in terms of, like technical committees, the courts aren't there to make political decisions. They're just there to do their job. So it strikes me, and I had this conversation with a senior counsel recently in terms of ethics. So what the court will do in a case like this is they will hear expert evidence, and it all depends on what those experts do. Because if those experts take a poor decision or a poorly formulated decision, that will be embedded into the decision. And that precedent which goes forward, the decision can be challenged, but no one will ever unpick the evidence to see what was there. And that is going to be a huge problem if you get to the wrong.
If I may, I don't think there is impediment. I think there is a certain false sense of urgency. You know, these things work in a due time. And it takes time until a case makes it to the Constitutional Court, and when everything will be heard and decided. And not only, and for such a complex system as the system of fundamental rights, not even the politicians can presume that they know what is the right balance. You know, this will, and I think the danger now is in this impatience. You know, pushing the regulation too fast. Now, I am, of course, big corporation, whatever. But the thing is, if you push a regulation too fast, it becomes ethics washing. It becomes an empty flag that will undermine trust and not create trust. You know, and of course, in industry, big corporations. Are important stakeholder in international standardization, but the fact that they say, oh, this regulation might go slower, it's not necessarily evil. You know, it's not. It's, you know, we could regulate only what is understood, what is measurable, and those are the dependencies. You know, like as I mentioned, my group, my trustworthiness group, there is 15 projects on various trustworthiness characteristics. Again, you know, it doesn't make sense to tell a technical committee, by the way, don't violate fundamental rights. That doesn't make sense. The same way, it doesn't make sense, by the way, be trustworthy, because trustworthiness is some 15 characteristics, and for different systems, there might be different thresholds, different characteristics might be relevant. This is what Nicola mentioned, you know, like we are trying to make trustworthiness a property, measurable objective property of a system, not to rely on the relationship, because in the end we are not psychologists. We don't decide what makes people trust. You know, very often those are irrational things that make them really trust things. But what we care is really objective thresholds of, you know, does it fail 2% of time or 0.2% of time? You know, these things we can measure, and that's what we are trying to achieve, and we are trying to avoid making political or even judicial decisions. That's not our place.
And did you want to add to that?
I think, yeah, I'd agree with the idea that I think we're rushing towards finding a set of tablets we can use to interpret things, and I think that's misplaced. I'm also interested, I think sooner or later courts have, and like, to me, this is a problem around statistics. So there's stuff around, you know, I think Oliver Wendell Holmes did a case on judging whether something was a forged signature based on the likelihood it could be forged. I'm sure there were massive debates around the admissibility of DNA evidence and what is the likelihood that that's not that person on trial who left that sample. I think this is about how courts interpret statistics. I think it's going to take a long time before we get it right, but I think they will need to do it first.
Yeah, and I think they'll need a lot of help. Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to make the point as well is, you know, we need to be aware that this, you know, the AI Act, you know, it's, you know, it's sort of a product safety regulation, and it's, you know, the new legislative framework is about, you know, being able to have products that you can sell across the single market. So, you know, with those three little words and fundamental rights, you know, they seem to open the door massively. But on the other hand, what they're really saying is, well, your product shouldn't contravene any of the existing regulation about rights. It doesn't say you have to go away and reason about fundamental rights. So you have to be aware of the legislation that's relevant in the sector that you're, you know, in your operating in. So, you know, I think it's you know, it may not be an accurate assumption, especially people who sort of interested in sort of AI ethics, that this is going to solve any of those problems, because, you know, you may come up with a few new mechanisms for breaching rights that exist, that are protected by existing regulations, and that's what you'll be tested. You probably will come up with new ways of having to trade off between rights. Okay. But again, I don't think the AI Act is going to give you the ground to solve that. That sort of stuff tends to get solved more at a national level, because actually, you know, the reason we have rights is because they're the things we can agree on. You know, what's more difficult to agree on is how they all interact with each other, and that often has to be done more in a sort of local, jurisdictional, and cultural basis. So, I think if we're hoping the AI Act will result in a lot of court cases that will tell us how to deal with sort of ethics and AI, we're probably,
I agree with that.
we may not be disappointed, but we'll be waiting a long time.
We're waiting a long time.
Okay, well, lawyers will like that idea.
Yeah.
So we're running out of time, but Nicola, I'm going to just throw at you one of the questions. What, if any, the role of public engagement in developing trustworthy AI? So do you think there is, that this is something that you need to involve the public with at an early stage? And how can that be done? And you have 1 minute to answer that question.
Yeah, I think the public engagement is something crucial to realize the true trustworthy artificial intelligence. Also, because one of the problems is that all this kind of discussion occur enter very close circle of expert, and maybe we need to bring to the public this kind of discussion. Well, for example, last month here at Trinity, we had this very wonderful initiative. It was a Discuss AI, was a talk with the people that we presented a concrete cases about the surveillance, and we asked the people to express their opinion, then they provide some information more to make them familiar with another point of view. And in this way, we see that also people that have not a technical or an expert background can, when these problems are placed in their everyday life, become immediately understandable. And I think that we need to bring this kind of themes, topics at the center of the public, the political agenda. Because as you say, there are things that cannot be solved in a technical committee, but need to be solved throughout a political process.
Thank you. And, we hope to some extent that these sort of tech human plus tech talks can be useful in starting that public engagement and continuing it. And with that in mind, I want to draw your attention to the next tech talk in the series, which is on Tuesday, the 22nd of November at 1 p.m. And Xiao Chen will, at that stage, who we're pleased to have with us today, will ask if AI can unblock learning patterns. So all that remains is just for me to thank our 4 excellent speakers. You have given us just so much to think about, the challenges, but also I think there's a degree of optimism there as to how to respond and how to deal with it. So we will thank you to the audience, and apologies from your poor chairman for not getting to all the questions here. But we will hope to address some of these issues going forward. So thank you very much.